Hey you guys, welcome to book review number 76. Today we'll be reviewing Empire of the Indus, a story of a river by Alicia Albina. This is a phenomenal book. This is a great book. It really combines the three things that I like, getting in the sweet spot of history, travel, and culture. Kind of the personal experience of the traveler, the history of the region that they're traveling through, as well as observations of not only the culture that she experiences, but kind of the present day current culture. Okay, so sort of the cool premise of the book is that Alicia goes upriver on the Indus, starting in the delta near Karachi in Pakistan, going all the way up to its source in Tibet. And as she goes up the river, she kind of, in parallel throughout the book, goes back in time, starting at Karachi with Pakistan's modern history. Actually, I'm going to open this up so I can remember all the parts. Starting in Karachi, sort of with the modern city, or modern country, started by Jinnah, which I covered extensively in Instant City, the review before this. Kind of talking a little bit about the history of slaves in the, I believe, 1400s. These are African slaves. Most people don't know that Arabs have an extensive history of enslaving Africans and sending them either to the Indian subcontinent or for their own uses in Mesopotamia. So yeah, as opposed to just sort of American or Anglo enslavement of black people. That being said, something mentioned in the book real quick is the enslavers and the enslaved often share the same religion, being Islam. So while the conditions were certainly not ideal or humanistic, there was sort of a acknowledgement that slaves were not just a commodity, but actually an integral part of the community, even though it's pretty unethical. So she covered a lot about that. Covered some about the Punjab region, forgot the name there for a second, the Five Rivers region. She talks sort of about the history of Babur and Akbar, as well as the name that I'm forgetting, but one of the rulers before that. Talks about how Sheikhdom came around in the Punjab, kind of covers Sheikhdom on both the Pakistani side as well as the Indian side. The Pakistani side, Sheikhdom being a religion that is neither Hindu nor Muslim, but kind of, it was based on like 7 gurus that came, it's very extensive in its history, that came around and, developed the country, developed the religion. But she covers it on both sides, Sheikhdom being almost completely dead in Pakistan, seeing that it's a, if not quite Sharia law, i.e. Islamic law, pretty damn close to Sharia law type state, versus the Indian side where Sheikhs weren't exactly admired, but certainly given more liberty to practice their religion than in Pakistan. Then she goes up into what is the political hot topic right now, the borderlands of Pashtun between Afghanistan and Pakistan, covering some of the regions there. Now, there's a lot of talk about like terrorism. She meets the U.S. Army. She talks also extensively, as I mentioned, in the history of the British invasion of Pushtan, as well as some of the invaders through the area. But kind of the thing that threw me for a loop was that she said, even though this is the most fundamentally conservative region in all of Islam, the dirty little secret that they don't want to tell you is actually this is going to be scary, there's more sexuality, or homosexuality, not just sexuality, sexuality specifically between two males in this region of Islam than any other region in the Islamic world, which is kind of strange. And she actually saw a picture of, there's like this, I don't think it's the Khyber Pass, but there's another pass between Afghanistan and Pakistan where it's considered like a hotbed of the Taliban. And Alicia didn't see it, but one of her drivers that she was going with showed her a picture of 2 dudes fucking right next to where this uh, entrance or this like obscure pass was that's commonly used by the Taliban and terrorist fighters throughout the region. So I thought that was an eye-opener, to say the least. But also she talks extensively about, the inability to sort of conquer the region and how independent the Pushtun people are, not only in terms of from the Western world, but also they're just independent of religion. They're just kind of, they're sort of like the West Virginia. I think that's the best way to put it. They're sort of like the West Virginia of the Islamic world. And then she goes back further, talks about the Aryans up near Gillette, and the Swat Valley. She talks about Buddhism in the Swat Valley. So, Islam before actually became the dominant religion in Pakistan and in the region. Buddhism was or Afghanistan was the primary transmitter of Buddhism from the Indian subcontinent to China and the Far East. Now, actually considering that, as I said, Islam has taken over Afghanistan and Pakistan, and Hinduism has reemerged as the dominant religion in India, really the area of the world that is most predominantly known for its various sects of Buddhism is the Far East. So I wouldn't say there would be a dead religion, but certainly it's the fact that Buddhism moved through the Swat Valley, kind of along the Silk Road up into China and the Far East, very important in Buddhist history. And actually, there's been a lot of ancient relics that unfortunately have been destroyed, artifacts that have been destroyed by Islamic militant groups in Afghanistan and in northern Pakistan, near the Indus, that was caused by their hatred of, they've been destroyed. What am I trying to say here? The Buddhist relics have been destroyed by Islamic, kind of fundamentalist groups. She also talks sort of about the history of Alexander that kind of came through the region, and how the thing that I remember was they invaded this one mountain fort area, and for some reason it stuck in my head how emotional the Greeks were. Either crossing, another thing is they tried to cross some rivers in Punjab, and it was ultimately sort of their Waterloo, if you will, and a fort that they famously conquered, but kind of really by this point, Alexander's army was sort of at the edge of its abilities. That being said, the influence that Alexander had, even in the sliver amount of time, she mentions was not initially really felt, but kind of later rulers acknowledged Alexander's presence, if you will. Also, it's just very odd because mostly at this time it was a Turkic, kind of a combination of Turkic rule from the north and Indian subcontinent people from the south. So the fact that the Greeks came from so far away and actually had an influence on this region is quite remarkable. And actually, one of the things I mentioned that Buddhism moved from India via Afghanistan to China. It was around the same time period that Alexander invaded, and therefore they think some of the very basic shapes you see in Buddhist art in China, which is much more symbolic, or I don't know exactly how to put it, but there is influence of kind of Greek art in Chinese Buddhist art that you don't see in Indian Buddhist art, and I think that was because of Alexander and the raid during this time period. She also talks about the Aryans. I mentioned those are the Turkic people. There's been great debate. Well, actually, there has been great debate whether they're Turkish or not Turkish, whether they were independent of the caste system of India or were part of the Brahmins. Now, something that should be mentioned is early, and this is all having to do with Hinduism or kind of larger Indian subcontinent ideals. Now, something that should be mentioned is civilization in India started in the Indus Valley, and then very early on in their history, and as it kind of petered out there, moved down to the Ganges region, where really most people would say the center of Hindu and Indian culture is not in the Indus Valley anymore, but is in the Ganges, is in the heart of India, obviously the heart of India, not Pakistan, which has a different name. But that being said, the earliest, I don't know if it's the Brahmaputra, or yeah, that's the name of a river. The earliest sort of Indian Hindu texts come from the northern regions, come from the Indus Valley, come from the early civilizations having to do with the Aryans during this time period. Now that being said, she goes further upriver. This is kind of in far, far north Pakistan, so what they call the northern region around Gillette. One other thing that kind of she mentions as the current culture, which I thought was really cool. Like I said, this is a great mix of current culture, past history, and her observation. I mean, that's really sort of the triangle of this book that works so, so well. She mentions she sees a polo match. And we think of polo in the West as a very sort of aristocratic, Anglican kind of thing. But it's thought that polo actually developed in Turkic countries, and then through diffusion over time, eventually came to Europe and became, like I said, a game of the aristocrats. But she said that she saw a game that took place at 10,000 feet at this pass that took place between a group from, let's see, I think is it Gillette and Chitral? Yeah, Gillette and Chitral, Giljit and Chitral, that took place in between this pass near northern Kashmir in the northern boundary areas. But she said it was just like the cool, well, not the coolest sporting, well, maybe it was the coolest sporting event, but it was a really cool sporting event that she saw that was just kind of in these huge mountains, 25,000 feet, this big pass, grassy, almost no trees, so you could see for miles and miles and miles, and just this huge game of polo played on horse, this being a big horse region and stuff. Then she really goes way far back in history and goes into the main part of Kashmir, or the Indian-controlled part of Kashmir, and covers the very early civilizations. Now, she says that the actual center of the early pre-Aryan civilizations, and this is what we talk about when we talk about the very first civilizations before the Aryans, one of them started in Mesopotamia and the other one started in the Indus Valley. She noticed the trading kind of stuff that goes on there that's really cool. She noticed they had very little military, which is why they made a fall into the Aryans, when the barbaric Aryans kind of invaded from the north on their horses. These people were not horse people, the very, very early settlers around Lee and Da, Kargil, that area, Sardu, kind of in the upper reaches of the Indus. And yeah, like I said, it was one of the very first civilizations. It was also one of the first civilizations that developed city planning, because all of the cities along this river, like I said, they didn't use horses, they used the actual river Indus as a transportation route, were all developed the same. They were all had the same look to them. So it was really cool. It was like one of the first civilizations. I know. It was really cool. Finally, she goes to Tibet and tries to find the source of the Indus. As I said, this book follows the Indus, talked about the importance of agriculture in the Indus, be it Punjab, be it Sindh, be it the British irrigation schemes that worked. The Indus being a very fickle river, so it floods and then it goes way down, it floods and it goes way down. So it's just the importance of the Indus to Pakistan and this region can't be overstated. I mean, it is the region. It's the reason why the region exists. So in Tibet, she tries to find the source, starting with Mount Kailash, which kind of in history is known as the source of the Indus, but it's not the actual source. It's like the religious or spiritual source of the Indus. The actual source of the Indus being to the north. And she goes on a long trudge with a drunken Tibetan, just a lout, to find the source, and eventually does in this huge, like 15,000 foot, not mountain. The mountains are way higher than that. 15,000 foot kind of alluvial plain, or not alluvial plain, but just kind of a valley where the Indus emerges out of a spring in the ground. So I thought that was pretty cool. But in general, this is a great book. The Empire of the Indus is the winner of the Somerset Maugham Award. I would say, like some of Peter Hessler's books, I would say Chasing the Dragon, Through the Heart of the Golden Triangle. Yeah, really, this is maybe like Between China and India, the one about Myanmar. This is a phenomenal book. This really hits the sweet spot between, like I said, culture, history, and like current travel observations, like the family she stays with. I mean, there's so much to this book. I didn't even talk about like the hospitality of the Pashtuns, which is kind of Pashtuns, which is opposite of kind of this terrorist killer image. You know, she was. There were only a couple times that she felt she was in danger. Much more often in the Islamic world, this very sort of demonized world that we see in the West. She was greeted as a visitor, given great hospitality. You know, so I could go on and on. But this is a great book. Empire of the Indus, the story of a river. Check it out, you guys, by Alicia Albinia. All right, keep watching. I'm sure I'm going to have some more. See ya.